Good morning. I would like to introduce the presentation I'm about to make before we go into our next plenary session. For our future, a conversation with Arctic youth. Just to introduce it, when I was a young girl growing up in rural Alaska, reporters would come from all over the country and from all over the world to interview members of my community about the Exxon Valdez oil spill. I remember thinking at a very young age, why don't they ever ask us how we feel about it? Why don't they ask the kids? Although the Exxon spill was very different than what is taking place in the Arctic today, I can't help but wonder what would happen if we did in fact ask them. If we can all agree that our young people are our future, then why aren't we consulting them? The theme of this year's Arctic Encounter is charting a path to U.S. leadership in the far north. In organizing this year's conference, I started to reflect back on that question that I would ask myself. Why don't they ask us? Well, with the help of two of my fellow law students here at UW, we did just that. We came up with a comprehensive survey that covered a range of issues, concerns, hopes, and dreams, and we distributed it to every school we could locate in northern Alaska. The fate of the far north, Arctic resources, and the people who live there are quite literally in the hands of a small circle of power players. Teachers in many of the schools who responded to our survey explained to the students that their responses would be heard by people who make these big decisions, people with influence. I'm here to tell you that those people, the people who will shape the future of the Arctic, are sitting in this room right now. Before I go into what these students had to say, I hope that you'll lend weight to the old adage that says, with great power comes great responsibility. We are privileged to have convened here this weekend together as a collective group that has great power through our education, research, our ability to write and pass legislation, and to command entire departments, lawmaking bodies, universities, and branches of the U.S. military. Also among us are members of the national and international media. I hope that we will listen to what these young people have to say with an open mind and an open heart. For many, the Arctic is a sexy and exciting topic, especially given the important developments this month. But for these kids and others living in the far north, the Arctic is just everyday life. We have the power and the responsibility to hear their voices and to consider the wisdom that these young people have to offer. Let us understand the urgency and call to action these young people are asking of us and recognize our duty to respond. 75 Arctic schools were included in the survey, and we heard back from 11. We identified 5th through 8th graders as an ideal group to survey because they are old enough to understand what's happening around them, but still young enough to be quite honest about it. Our sole objective throughout this survey process was to give a voice to those most affected by Arctic policy decisions, both today and most importantly in the future. So out of 11 participating schools, we heard from 157 students in grades 3rd through 12th. 84% of the student responses, however, were within our targeted age group, 5th through 8th grade. We told these students that their answers would be presented to some of the most influential Arctic leaders in the country. We continued to receive responses up until just last Friday. To get the children thinking about their place in the Arctic, we asked them to tell us about their own hopes and ambitions for their futures. The top 3 career aspirations were to become pilots, police officers, and basketball players. My personal favorite was one 5th grade student who lives on Little Diomede Island. For those of you who don't know, that's in the middle of the Bering Strait. He wants to become an FBI agent because they carry shields. Another student, an 8th grader in Nome, wants to be a Navy SEAL because he likes, quote, being stealthy and wants to follow in his grandfather's footsteps. As you can already tell, getting to know these young people through their responses was both fun and inspiring. You can see here where the 11 participating schools are located. All of these students and schools that responded are rural and difficult to access. The majority of the survey questions were designed to better understand whether and how these communities are impacted by global warming and climate change, and whether or not that is impacting their way of life. As you can see, approximately 2/3 of all respondents report having learned about climate change in school, think climate change is either a problem now or will be in the future, and have personally noticed changes in their own surroundings. However, it was evident that these young people, like most of us here today, are quite unsure about what to do about it. We would like to highlight for you 2 schools that are perhaps the most remote and most susceptible to climate change. The first is Diomede School on Little Diomede Island. Little Diomede is located in the Bering Strait, just 2.5 miles away from Big Diomede Island, which is Russian territory. As you can see here, the line separating these islands is in fact the international maritime border between the US and Russia, as well as the international date line. This is a photo of the community. The population of Diomede is about 130 people. 93% identify as Alaska Native. Diomede's economy relies heavily upon a subsistence way of life. Their main food sources come from the Bering Sea. Historically, locals have been able to rely on sea ice for winter hunting in mid-December, but recently the Bering Strait has not been freezing over until March. So this extreme change in sea ice has had a devastating impact upon Diomede's subsistence way of life. As you can see here, according to U.S. Fish and Wildlife, over the course of the past 20 years, local hunters have only been able to kill 8 walrus in 2011, whereas in 1991, they caught over 500. We received responses from 10 students in Diomede. The students were between 4th and 8th grade and 1 12th grader. It's worth noting that there are only 17 students at Diomede School, so in actuality, our survey accounts for over 50% of the total student population on the island. This is a photo of the entire school. I personally like their little silly glasses. Let's take a look at what some of these students had to say. You'll notice that 3 of them attribute their knowledge to the stories they've heard from their elders, and they are worried about subsistence hunting and the ice. We asked them what advice they would like to give to Arctic leaders. Come up with an idea to fix global warming. I want you guys to know that we, as a world, need to put our differences aside to work together if we want a future at all. We also asked them how they will be affected if climate change continues. If the walrus go north, what type of food do I eat? We will face lost subsistence. Warmer summers, warmer winters, and less animals. The second and last school we would like to highlight is in Kaktovik, Alaska. Kaktovik is located on Barter Island along the northern border of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, commonly known as ANWR. 286 people live in Kaktovik, 88% of which identify as Alaska Native, primarily Inupiat. Similar to Diomede, Kaktovik relies on subsistence. As stated in the North Slope Boroughs Development Plan for Kaktovik, the community's subsistence lifestyle connects them to their history, culture, and spirit. On January 15th, we heard from 14 students in grades 5 through 8. Almost all of them have noticed changes in their environment and believe that climate change is or will be a problem. 3 of them think climate change has already escalated to a state of disaster. Let's take a look at what some of these students had to say. You'll notice that they are most concerned about relocation, their ability to go whale hunting, loss of subsistence, the polar bears, and fossil fuels. The people of Kaktovik are seeing a lot more of polar bears in that area of the North Slope. As sea ice decreases, locals have seen severe changes in weather and hunting abilities. So this concludes the substance of our presentation. There was not enough time to cover all of the student responses this morning, but I encourage you to reach out to us to learn more. I'd like to point out the two individuals who worked so hard to bring this project to life, Zianya Brewer and Frederick Sawyer. Frederick standing right here. Without them, this would absolutely not have been possible. They will be here at the Arctic Encounter all day and are available to answer any questions you might have. And finally, I would like to announce that this has been recorded, and a video clip of this presentation will be sent to all of the classrooms that participated in this survey, so that the students can see for themselves the results of their expert participation. Since they will be watching this online in the near future, I would like to show our appreciation for their amazing contribution to the 2015 Arctic Encounter Symposium. So please join me in a round of applause for the youth of the U.S. Arctic.